This is episode number 63 now of Raise the Banner podcast. No, 62. 62. God, I'm off right now, man. We're going to do some Patriots talk now, though. Bill Belichick made his comments. Made his comments about it, which was very interesting to see. But obviously, the big story is, Jerod Mayo is out as head coach of the New England Patriots. We all sat on this, exact spot on this podcast a year ago, and we were saying, we kind of like this signing. I was a fan of the signing at the time, but unfortunately, it really never seemed to work out. Where are you guys on this? Do you think it was deserved, and how are you feeling about this head coaching search?
So I'll turn the clocks back to last week, leading up to week 18. And Matt, you and I had gone back and forth a handful of times about, what we thought was going to happen, what should happen. I would say 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, I would 100% have said, no way Jerod Mayo gets fired. I think I said it to you 50 times that, to me, Robert Kraft cares a lot about his image. And I thought that big picture, it was worse for his image to admit that his handpicked successor was the wrong decision. And that's why I did not think he would get fired. The last month unfolded and the confidence level in that waned. I still didn't think he would get fired, but I wasn't as confident as I was in that belief. Towards the end, I felt that he probably, not that he should get fired, but that if he did, it was deserved. When you look at, unfortunately, you never want to see a one and done, but when you look at it, you have to think about the factors of, and there's certain things we're not going to know, but like, did they maintain control of the locker room? Were guys still willing to go out there and battle and run through a wall for them? Those things, who really knows? Maybe we may never know if that's the case, but I just felt like the on-field product, the things that they were making mistakes on in week 1 were the same things they were doing in week 18. And those are the things that you don't want to see. I want to say it was Burt Breer kind of hit the nail on the head with this one. He said that, as a season progresses, especially in a down year, you want to see what the team could be in a year, what players could be in a year. What is the identity of the team? And the Patriots right now, unfortunately, don't have an identity. As the year went on, injuries aside, the defense I thought lagged behind the offense, and then eventually the offense, even as inconsistent and bad as they were, leapfrog the defense in terms of, well, what's better, offense or defense? Again, that's, I said injuries aside, hopefully they do a full search, to find the next guy. It certainly feels like Mike Vrabel, it's like his job to lose. I want them to conduct a full search. I wouldn't love the idea of them, going out and hiring Vrabel tomorrow or even Monday. Because then it's going to be like, well, you just powered through Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich so that you could honor your Rooney Rule requirement, and then that way you could just go get the guy you wanted, 2 days later. I'd like to see the full search. I think that, better days lie ahead for the coaching staff. Unfortunately, I think that, whether he was fully prepared or not, I feel like Kraft did a little bit of a disservice to Mayo. It didn't put him in the best position to succeed. Hopefully they don't replicate that and that they get a guy who, connects with players, but, knows how to do the job and, can bring the Pats back to, what they were 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was definitely 100% deserved, the firing. And like, that's easy from, ESPN or whoever to stand up here, like from a bird's eye view and say, well, the roster was terrible. Bill left this team in shambles. This is the first time head coach, give him a chance. But like, if you actually sat and watched the games and actually like listened to him at the podium and everything else, nothing was consistent. He would take one step back and seemingly one step forward and seemingly like 3 or 4 steps back. Would say that he was going to bench Ramondre Stevenson, ended up starting him like a half an hour later. He would, not discipline players who said they would need to be disciplined. And like, it felt like he was very much over his head from the start. But again, I agree. It sucks to see a one and done coach, especially after the product that we saw for the past, 3-4 years, even with Bill. But that being said, again, like the reports coming out that he handpicked DeMarcus Covington as opposed to letting Steve Belichick continue to call the plays is a detriment. There's a lot of just detriments and black marks on his record that are coming out now that we didn't know about in the season, and even still, we were still calling for his job at the end of the year because, as you said, Ben, nothing got better. If anything, they got worse over the course of the year.
Yeah, things kind of. Ben, you kind of hit it right. Like we were both feeling, even until like mid-season. I kept saying, even on X or Twitter or whatever, that like it would have to be a catastrophe for him to be fired. And by I think it was after the Chargers game where it really tipped over the edge for me. I went to that game and it was just an absolute disaster. I was more miserable than anything that could be at the game, where it was okay. Like this really might be a catastrophe. In terms of him being ready to go, people like to yap on me because of the whole qualification discussion and stuff like that. Was he qualified? All that type of stuff. I don't necessarily think it's not that he wasn't qualified. I just think he didn't do a good enough job, and he went about it from day one incorrectly. We talked about even some of the discipline stuff. Like we heard about the Stevenson's thing in week 17, where supposedly that got screwed up because he told AVP and AVP didn't tell Stevenson. So Stevenson ran out there for the first play. And so like little things like that in terms of leadership, running your team, it should be Mayo going to Stevenson and saying those things. And it should be decided like the night before. So it's not an issue like on game day. He was just he went about it wrong from the beginning. Obviously, like you said, we heard the stories about him. If they won, he was all giddy, and if they lost, he was like miserable. I think the quote was like as if his dog got shot, like stuff like that. He just kind of never really took off on the right foot, and it seemed to kind of snowball from there throughout the season. And what happened was you had a pretty shitty roster. And if you're not a good coach, then that shitty roster is going to be really bad, and it's going to look even worse than what it is. And that's basically what kind of happened. And so by year end, we're at a catastrophe. And I was kind of just saying, hey, Kraft needs to, Ben, you were saying, obviously, like Kraft wouldn't want to admit that he made a mistake. What I think happened was, he does care about his image so much. The noise became so loud from the fans that it became, I think it would look worse if I stick with him and we're just miserably bad again next season.
Yeah, and that definitely changed at the end of the year. That was one of the reasons that I was like, there's people talking about him being fired now. It wasn't just, scuttlebutt on X or on, our pod or other podcasts about like, should Jerod Mayo keep his job? It was NFL talking heads, pondering like, it's been really bad. Like this might not, like Jerod Mayo may not get a second season. That's when I started to think like, maybe Kraft views this differently, where he views the image from a perspective of, he's not going to be viewed in a good light if he doesn't, I don't want to say do what the fans want, but just given the perception of Mayo not being good, the team not being good, the team not developing, like that became the image he wanted to protect, not the, I wrote into Mayo's contract that he was going to be the successor to Bill. This makes me look bad that I was wrong to do this. He went, we can't do another year of this. Kraft's also what, 83? Like he's not
something like that. Yeah.
Like he's not going to be around. Like he can't go through another 5-year rebuild. He's not going to see the end of it. He needs to get this right now. And I think that's really where, at least for me personally, the confidence started to change in whether or not I thought Mayo would get fired, because there was so much noise from people that are way more connected to the industry than, random people on the internet.
Yeah. And obviously I think the noise like became so loud that I kind of give him props. Not only did he do it, he did it friggin' an hour after the game.
Yeah,
like I was sitting there watching the 4:30 games, and I'm just looking at my phone. I think I was replying to someone, and it comes up from like Schefter or something like that, and I literally was like, "Holy shit!" And my wife is like, "What happened?" And I was like, "They already fired Mayo. Like, what? I did not expect it to happen this way."
It came from a fake account at first. So I had to like double check. It was like Schefter. I think I saw the first one, like My NFL Update. And I was like, this is not real. It's one of those like fake accounts. And then everyone tweeted it. I was like, oh shit, it's actually real.
That's why I like put I basically like I have one for Passan, Shefty, and then during certain parts of the year I'll put like basketball guys on it where I just get a notification when they post.
You don't have it for Rap Sheet. I have him and Schefter.
I have NFL. I have like NFL networks, maybe not NFL Network. NFL. I don't know. One of the NFL accounts that that often retweets him too.
Gotcha.
After, so I kind of see that too.
And I heard it from you first. You messaged me. So Sunday was Christmas number 7 for my family. My sister-in-law who lives in New Hampshire couldn't make the family Christmas because her kid was sick. So we did it. We did a second date. So we're over at my in-laws. And so I was only like half paying attention to my phone after the Pats game was over. And I just saw a message from Matt. It was all capitals, like bold letter, just said, wow. And I just waited patiently as the little dots were scrolling across the bottom of the phone to see what he was going to type. And I was like, wait, is this? I immediately started digging through X to be like, wait, is this really happening? Or are you trolling me?
Well, that's because sometimes we both just say, wow, and then we purposely say something super anticlimactic.
Yeah, you're like, wow, I painted my door in my house. Like,
or we'll just say wow and give a fake storyline or something like that. So we always have to go check to see if the other person's lying.
Yeah.
But anyways, the whole like head coaching search and stuff like that. First of all, and I feel very strongly about this. The Rooney Rule is the dumbest thing in the NFL. And I had some idiot. I won't even say his name. Some idiot try to call me the racist word because I said I hated it, and it's obviously nothing to do with that. It's the fact that you are forcing teams to entertain this rule when in any profession, in any job, the job should go to the best person for the job. If that is a white person, he should get it. If that's a black person, he should get it. It doesn't matter. So it's just the best person for the job. So I think I'm just not a fan of the whole rule. So I was vocal about that. But in terms of Vrabel, as we kind of see, Glenn declined his interview. And
he did officially decline the Pats request.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think part of it was so they could only interview today, tomorrow, and Saturday via Zoom, and he's already interviewing with 6 teams. And I think the Pats were
he didn't have time in his schedule, so it wasn't that he didn't want to. He literally couldn't fit it into his schedule.
Yeah, possibly. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he also was like, I don't think I'm going to bother because I know I'm not going to get it. But Bertrand and Zolak were talking today, and they kind of felt like it was a PR move because of the backlash over them interviewing Leftwich and Pep Hamilton, who are both minority candidates. They filled the Rooney Rule, but neither of them are coaching right now. And so to have them, and neither of them have ever been a head coach in the NFL. So them jumping into a head coaching role, it kind of looked a little sketchy. But that's what happens when you have a rule that dictates these type of things. It looks like there's a 99.9% chance that it's either Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. And I think and not every Patriots fan would agree, but I think probably the majority, 2/3, will say that means one way or another, whether it's Johnson or Vrabel, we're getting a major upgrade at head coach and just an overall major improvement from the head coaching spot. I'm excited. Ben Johnson is my favorite preference at the time right now.
Agreed.
I get the whole concept of, I want an offensive coach so it's less turnover. I want an offensive coach to maximize May. I get all that. that is a little bit of a preference, but I also prefer to just hire who I think is going to be the best coach. And so I'm willing to take a shot on Ben Johnson because he has been that impressive in Detroit. But if it's Vrabel, I'm going to be very happy about it because I think Mike Vrabel is a damn good football coach. And regardless of what people want to bitch about it, I put up a poll was like, if you don't want like Mike Vrabel, why don't you want the Pats to hire him? And like 92% of the votes were, I want an offensive coach or I just want Ben Johnson. And it's like, dude, like get a good head coach. That's what matters more than anything else in this game.
Yeah. And there is a I feel like, it changes with the wind. Who I want. It's certainly one of those two guys. But the thing for me is I go back and forth almost every day. Ben Johnson's a super creative offensive coach for the Lions. Yes, he has insane talent to play around with, but he still has to scheme those plays and write the playbook and teach these guys, double pass this and reverse and jet whatever it
fake
is,
fall
right?
down and fake fumble and
stealing plays from other teams and modifying them. I get that. That's the creative part that I like. But the other side of this is there is something to be said about the fact that, the Pats just went through a year of a first-time head coach who, you could debate whether he was qualified or not, but was certainly put in a no-win situation. Did not have experienced coaches around him on either side of the ball. A poor roster, a new sort of, but a new guy at the head of the front office, but utilizing the other guy's tools, so to speak. Not a great situation to succeed. So, there is something to be said about like, it would be nice if we had a guy who's proven he can be, I know he hasn't quote unquote won anything. I think he went to one conference championship game. He's got some playoff wins under his belt. But somebody who has a track record of winning at the NFL level and is a guy who relates to his players. I think that there's something to be said about that has an allure. That do you really want to go through a year of, we hired the more creative guy in Ben Johnson, and then it turns out that he's this, I guess people have said that he's like a weird guy and doesn't really know how to talk to the media, like doesn't really know how to communicate effectively to players. There's been some talk about that. So it's like, do you want the risk of, do we go through a potential another year of what we just went through because, you hired the offensive guy who, isn't quite sure how to control a room. And not to say that he can't, but that's where I'm stuck. There's
the big worry.
There's an appeal with Vrabel that he's not going to be that guy because he had success in Tennessee. He had 4 out of 6 or 5 out of 7 winning seasons, multiple division championships, and again success in the playoffs. Didn't get to or win a Super Bowl, but he's won. And obviously
Patriots.
I don't think
dynasty.
And I'm pretty sure he never lost to Bill as head coach of the Titans. I'm pretty sure that.
I'd have to check.
Feel free to check, but because the only 2 games that I know off the top of my head definitively are beating the Patriots in the playoffs in 2019. Technically it was 2020, but the 2019 season. And then I think it was the year prior. They like embarrassed them in the regular season.
That's when Brady threw his helmet, right?
Yeah. So, and then the other thing, and little bit of a grain of salt with this one. Vrabel, having played for the organization, he knows what the goal is. Like he knows what they're trying to get back to because he played in it. So I think that he has a better understanding than almost anybody of what the ultimate goal is to get back to because he played in it, so he knows what the expectations are, and hopefully, if and probably when he gets the job, that he's aware of the goal and he's committed to it because he knows what it was like to play in it.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it on the head how you kind of differentiate these 2 candidates. It's all right, Ben Johnson's the shiny new toy right now. Everybody wants him. He's got a really good offensive scheme. He does really well as a play caller, but that doesn't always translate to a good head coach. And by always, it very often does not translate to a good head coach.
Right.
You have to be, being a head coach is just a whole different world of responsibilities. You're in charge of a locker room. You're in charge of, 53 plays during the year, but even more in the summer, in training camp. You're in charge of an entire coaching staff. You're in charge of game prep, everything top to bottom, discipline, handling all the different personalities like that. And we see it with like Josh McDaniels in his 2 stints. Like he didn't know how to be that guy. And he's a pretty good OC, I think, overall. And he might end up back in New England, but he struggled. And then with Mike Vrabel, and, some people are saying the word safer. He's the safe option. And I don't necessarily
safe doesn't feel like the right word.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the right word. I understand what they're saying though. And it's because like we know what we'll get from Mike Vrabel. And I guess people have different opinions on what that is, but in my opinion, it's a good head football coach that has proven he can lead a team, has proven that he can have his team prepared, and has proven he can handle the situation. So, coming to New England, obviously we're still kind of right behind the Belichick era. Like that's still right there. Brady left.
He only left a year ago. Well,
yeah,
left.
Yeah. And, Brady's still 5 or 6 years away prior. We're still in that era where as much as the last 5 years have been pretty rough for Patriots fans, the expectations are still there. And, you talked about how he was here and he experienced it all. Like he knows what it takes to win here. Not that I think that that's a deciding factor, but it's a little bit of a bonus that he knows here. And then obviously that he has a relationship with Kraft already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that I don't really put too much like of a credence in because Mayo had a relationship with Kraft too, and that didn't pan out well.
No, oh yeah, it certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't automatically mean you're going to be good.
But
I'm just saying it's a little bit easier.
100%. Yeah, there's a little bit of there's less of an unknown. But I think that like what you said with with Vrabel knowing what it's like to win here, like that adds to the appeal of he's been a head coach. He's won games at the NFL level as a coach. He's hard-nosed, he's gritty, he holds players accountable, but he's not an ass. He's an ass when he used to be. He's a motivator. Yeah. He's an ass. But he's not like a bumbling idiot. Like they were saying, and I don't know if I read this or if Matt, you told me this on text that after losses on flights home, Mayo would be playing poker on the team flight on the way home. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like you're trying to connect with players, but like there's a time and place if you want to play poker with the players. It's not on a flight home after a loss, and I'm not saying, and Matt, I think you tweeted this. And I think that it was overblown. It was like, oh my God, like clearly Mayo's in over his head if he's playing, go fish instead of watching film after a loss. But it feels like a game Jerod Mayo would play on a flight home. I don't know. No offense. No offense to Jerod if this somehow finds his way onto his computer back home somewhere. But I feel like Mayo knows how to. I don't know. Mayo. Vrabel knows how to.
Names.
Too many names. And Vrabel knows how to connect with players, but he also knows how to get the best out of them too. I mean, Ryan Tannehill was good, not great, and yes, he had a pretty good defense in Tennessee, and arguably the best running back of our generation, borderline, and Derrick Henry. But like he had good, not great teams, and I feel like he absolutely got the most out of those teams when he needed to.
Yeah, and in his last 2 years in Tennessee, those rosters were dog shit.
Yeah,
dog shit. They lost a ton of players defensively. AJ Brown got traded. Taylor Lewan.
Taylor Lewan.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't know why I was going to say he was
he was injured and then retired. The O-line went to shit, and not only that,
I think they lost a couple of guys on defense too. Like Kevin Byard was gone. Logan Ryan left, I think.
Oh yeah, but not only that, they had, and I believe it was 2022, they had like a record number of injuries on their team. I believe, if I remember looking it up, they had, if you account for like every player that's injured, they had like 339 missed games totaled up between all the players, and it was like 40 more than the next highest in the NFL. Ryan Tannehill, and people want to talk about, they won 13 games over the last 2 years. Ryan Tannehill missed half of those games over the last 2 years. They went 9-11 with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is what? A average QB at best. His peak was like an above average QB.
Yeah, I was at a peak. He was probably like QB 12
yeah,
to 15.
12. Exactly.
In that range. Like I said, he was a good, not great quarterback. Yeah.
And so for the fact that they, like I said, those rosters were dog shit. And he went in, not that 6 or 7 games is impressive, but those teams still competed pretty well. They were coached well. They were hard to beat still. And then when they actually had some talent on the roster, they were the 1 seed. Like he went 11-5 and 12-5 in the 2 years prior to his last 2 years here, because they actually had some good talent, and they, you win 12 games with Ryan Tannehill. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty damn good. Like, I don't know, like looking around the league right now of, who's the worst QB in the playoffs that won 11 or more games? Knicks didn't win 11.
Let's see. That would be, let's see, the worst QB with 11 or more wins.
I'd have to look at exactly the standings so I know.
Let's see. Well, the 11-win teams are.
So you had Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson,
Mahomes,
Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold. There you go. Oh, and Jordan Love.
Say
so those are your 11-win. Those are your 11-win teams. I just listed probably, what was that, like 8 out of the top 12 quarterbacks in the league, like roughly.
Probably.
Yeah, and,
I don't know. Jordan. Proselytization is it's probably Jordan Love.
Yeah, and I was discussing this in a Pat's chat earlier today, and it was like, if you looked at the run rate for the Titans while Vrabel was there, and they were like -7% in their run rate, so they ran the ball a ton. And I was like, well, if you have Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry as your quarterback and running back, I think you're going to run the ball more. Like this is kind of common sense. And someone came back and was like, Geno Smith was the 4th in passing attempts this year. Like, you don't obviously have to be a run team if your quarterback's not that good. And I go look at the list. If you took the top 16 pass attempts for quarterbacks this year, total pass attempts, you would have probably the top 14 QBs in the league, plus Bo Nix and Geno Smith. I believe that's what it was. I was like, if you're a good quarterback, you're going to throw the ball around. If you're an average quarterback and you have an elite, like you just said, the best running back in the generation,
yes,
you're going to run the ball a lot.
Right, you're going to be run heavy because they had a good O-line. And again, Tannehill was good, not great. But Derrick Henry it's like, you put Derrick Henry on any team with a, I bet you put Derrick Henry on the 2024 New England Patriots, you're going to be a run heavy offense.
Yeah, and he probably runs for like 1,300 yards at least.
Right. And then, but to say, and I like where you were going with this, if you mentioned it, I hate to duplicate it, but like, you can't say that, well, if it's Mike Vrabel because, he was a run heavy team, get ready for Drake May to just hand the ball off 50% of the time.
Yeah, it's
like, no, like it's you coach and you scheme your offense around your best players. You don't, exactly. It's like, that's why Derrick Henry got the ball 20 to 30 times a game, for the vast majority of his career because he was always one of, if not the best player on offense on his teams.
Yeah. If Vrabel had Tom Brady in, I don't know, in Ty Spears, their running back, like one of their running backs right now, you know what they would have been doing? Passing the ball a lot. Like a lot. If you have a great quarterback, you're going to pass more. If you don't have a great quarterback, you're going to pass less. When you have an elite running back, you're going to run the ball more. When you don't have an elite running back, you're not going to run the ball a lot. It's a very simple factor. So that those comments just piss me off. Not only that, like it depends who's the OC. Like, you know, obviously we talk about if it's Josh McDaniels, maybe Tommy Rees. You know, we can jump in more in those conversations after we figure out who the actual head coach is. But, you know, it just because he's a defensive guy, and I had someone make this comment to me, and it was like, Vrabel is the worst thing for Drake May. Like, he's a defensive head coach. He'll kill Drake May. And my response to him was very simple. How did Drake May develop this year? And he couldn't really give me a straight answer because the answer was, well, he looked like he developed pretty well, and he had a defensive head coach who was clearly not good at all. Like, never mind just a defensive head coach, he was just not good. And he still developed pretty well. So if you hire, you know, Vrabel, and I know people don't like this name, but Josh McDaniels, just as an example, even if it's just Josh McDaniels coming back, and I know, you know, I'm not in love with that idea, but you know, you'll have someone that can handle the offense. So it's kind of that simple. Like, you can have a defensive head coach as long as you have an OC that can handle himself. And that's the conversation is, you know, there's more turnover. If they're a really good OC, they're more likely to get a job. Like, the same goes on defense. Like, if you're an elite defensive coach, you get a head coaching job. Like, we see it everywhere.
Yeah.
I
was gonna say, to go back. I wanted to look this up because I was hyper focused on this. So we talked about, you know, if you've got an elite running back, you're going to hand the ball off, right? So Lamar Jackson in 2023 was handing the ball off to who?
Dobbins and
Gus Edwards, and who was the other one?
Keaton Mitchell and Hill.
In 2023, Lamar Jackson played in take it with a grain of salt. He played in 16 games because they didn't need to play the last game of the season. He had 457 pass attempts. Okay, in 2024, which was good for 17th in the league. He was 16th in the NFL with 474 passes. So just probably roughly the same pace. Okay.
Yeah. They're also always been a run heavy team. Although just rushing attempts. Oh, you did pass attempts. Never mind.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. Okay. Derrick Henry. Who was handing the ball off to Derrick Henry last year for Tennessee? Who was Tennessee's quarterback last year?
It was Tannehill and Malik Willis and Josh Dobbs.
Last year?
That was
Will Levis was a rookie last year. It was definitely.
Oh,
Will
no.
Levis.
Yeah. It was Tannehill and Will Levis.
Okay.
Tannehill and Will Levis split the season.
Okay, in 17 games, Derrick Henry led the NFL with 280 rush attempts. Want to take a wild guess how many rush attempts Derrick Henry had in 2024?
Is it more?
It's a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Ravens' offense was filthy.
300
he was on the field more.
325 more rush attempts in 2024. He carried the ball 40 more times over a season this year compared to last year with a better quarterback who's also a runner. So that just proves that even with a better running back, Lamar Jackson still threw the same number of passes, roughly, because if he had played 17 games last year, he would have finished with roughly 474 pass attempts.
Yeah.
So that just negates the entire argument that when you have an elite running back, you don't throw the ball. Well, clearly they do. Now, granted, Lamar Jackson is a league average pass attempt quarterback. He's done it for 2 years in a row. And just for comparison, Lamar Jackson, 474 passes. Joe Burrow led the NFL with 652.
So many throws.
Yeah. Now, granted, Cincinnati
Cincinnati doesn't have a great running back.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Chase Brown had like 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns this year. But
No, he didn't.
look it up.
Did he really?
He had a
Yep.
shit ton of yards. Yeah, I played against him
Total
a lot.
yards or rushing yards?
Hold on. Chase Brown.
Pretty sure.
Oh, he had 1,500 rushing yards, dude.
Chase Brown had 1,350 total yards. And
Total yards, okay.
And he had 11 total touchdowns.
How many were rushing yards?
990.
Yeah, 990.
Yeah, all right. Those are big differences than 1,500 rushing yards.
Yeah, no, I did I say rushing? I meant total. It was 1,300.
Well, you just said 1,500 yards, so I just kind of like took it
sorry.
as.
I meant total yards. That was my mistake. But yeah, Chase Brown had well, they lacked an elite running back. Go
ahead and I mentioned it, but go ahead and read like the top 16 quarterbacks in pass attempts.
So in 2024, let's see. So outside of the top 16, Jalen Hurts at 22
and he missed multiple games.
Is the only quarterback outside the top 16 that's a playoff quarterback. He also got hurt. He missed 2 games. So I'll just rattle them off real quick. Joe Burrow 6, and this is going to be in order. Burrow 652, yep. Aaron Rodgers 584, Mahomes 581, Geno Smith 578, Baker 570.
Wait, before you go. So Cincy, average run game. KC, Pacheco, they haven't really had a good run game.
Good, not great.
Geno Smith, they have a pretty good run game, but even Ken Walker's missed some games. And Rodgers, they have a good run game.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So then Baker, 5th, 570. Bo Nix, 567. Caleb Williams, 562. Sam Darnold, 545. Kyler Murray, 541. Well, and okay, here's a really good example. Okay, you want to talk about run-heavy teams that also have good quarterbacks and good running backs? Jared Goff had the 10th most pass attempts in a run-first offense.
Yeah,
yeah.
Obviously, a factor into it all, like how many overall snaps the offense plays. Like, if you're a good team, you're going to have more snaps.
Yeah. So Jared Goff had 539 pass attempts.
Find me what's a mid team with a good quarterback.
Mid team. Mid team with a good quarterback. The Packers.
And where's Jordan Love in that?
19th, 425 pass attempts. But they also upgraded their run game. Aaron Jones.
Yeah, they had Josh Jacobs too.
Thank you, Josh Jacobs. Aaron Jones went to Minnesota.
And Love missed some time, right? He had
2 games. Yeah, he played in 15 games.
I was gonna say he had a hamstring or something like that.
Brock Purdy had 455 pass attempts. So 19 fewer pass attempts than Lamar, and he played 2 fewer games.
I will. San Fran obviously is a dynamic offense, and they were
well. And you know what? Let me go back to 2023 when they were actually good. So in 2023, Brock Purdy was 20th in pass attempts at 444.
Yeah, and that makes sense. You know why? Because their best player was their running back.
Right, because Christian McCaffrey was fully healthy.
Yeah, and that goes. It just not to we kind of went off topic, off the whole conversation, but the whole narrative that defensive head coaches aren't the way to go. I put out the stat: 42% of the NFL playoff teams are defensive head coaches. So we're basically one team off from being split 50-50. Yeah. On top of that, 62% of playoff teams right now, their head coach is not the offensive play caller. So adding into that, you have John Harbaugh, who is a special teams guy, Jim Harbaugh, who is an offensive guy technically, but does not call plays. Yeah,
correct.
And Nick Sirianni, who is an offensive guy, but Kellen Moore calls plays. So you have 62% of the coaching staff, head coaches, that don't call plays. That alone is the example. Just have good talent. Good.
I was gonna say it's rare to like. I can only think of 2 head coaches on the top of my head who call plays, and it's Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan are the only 2
Well,
coaches off the top of my
McVay
head.
does.
Yeah,
LaFleur
okay.
does.
Well, I said for me, like just guys I
Yeah.
knew off the top of my head. But like, it's hard to find guys. Like, you'd have to really dig deep. Like, who else besides those 4 guys do you know that calls plays? Like, you'd have to. Like, you probably have
Who's the OC for Denver?
Well, Peyton calls plays. So Sean Payton
Peyton
calls
calls plays
plays.
too.
Mike McDaniels calls plays. Zach Taylor calls plays. Does Tomlin call defensive plays? No.
Flores.
No.
Well, Flores did.
But
Is Arthur Smith their defensive coordinator? Or is he offense?
Offense.
He's
He's their OC. I
have no idea who
but
the
Tomlin doesn't call
coordinator
the defensive plays. Now that I think of it,
Tomlin
But
doesn't
anyways,
call any. Tomlin doesn't call
there's
any
a good
plays.
amount, and it's increased over the last few years. But like the fact of the matter is the real truth behind what creates sustained winning and good teams is a good quarterback.
Correct. Well,
Like-
look at.
like
I mean,
what- like what do-
you talk about the defensive coach not being the guy. I mean, look at last year and D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud.
He developed fine.
He
Who's the
developed
best
fine.
quarterback? Who's the 2 best quarterbacks in the league this year?
Burrow.
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. What are their coaches? Neither of them are offensive coaches. Okay. The 2
No, but how much
MVPs
stock do you put in?
McDermott wasn't an offensive guy before he got the head job.
No, he was the Panthers DC.
Okay.
How much
Great
stock do you
team.
put in then? Let's say Ben Johnson does get the head coaching job. He calls the plays for whatever reason. Then that creates a dynamic duo, like so to speak, between him and Drake May versus Mike Vrabel gets the job. He brings in an offensive coordinator to call plays. If that OC kills it, gets a head coaching job somewhere
Yes.
else. Now you're on your
And
third OC. You know what I mean?
That's
Yeah.
the benefit of having the offensive an offensive coach, obviously. And so obviously that's a consideration. If you have 2 guys you absolutely love and you can't decide, like maybe yes, you lean offensively. But like the ultimate goal is to have a good head coach.
Yeah.
So like this goes back to like, taking best player available. Like if your number 1 need is a tackle and your third need is a cornerback and you have the cornerback ranked like clear cut above the tackle, you should take the cornerback, because if you slide down your board just to take a tackle and miss, you look like an idiot.
Yeah.
Because you didn't take the better player. So I mean, like that's really what it comes down to. So like that's why I think I'm willing to take the chance of Ben Johnson, because I think he's been so impressive as a play caller and running that offense that I'm willing to take that chance that he can also be a good overall head coach. But after that, there's no one offensively that, Liam Cohen's of interest a little bit, but there's no one else that like screams to me saying like I'm confident enough that he's going to be very good as a head coach more than Mike Vrabel. There's no one else. Ben Johnson's the only guy that goes into that same territory for me as Mike Vrabel right now. And so that's why I lean Ben Johnson, because yes, he is the offensive guy, and you can pair him with Drake May for the next 15 years, hopefully. But after that, like I'm going on the other side of the ball because I know what Mike Vrabel can be for this team.
So if you're the Patriots, what about Ben Johnson do you have to see to make you go, he's the guy over Vrabel? Knowing what Vrabel has going for him with history, both within the organization and as a coach, what do you think Ben Johnson would have to say or do or present in his interview that makes them go, we should probably think twice about Mike Vrabel being the guy?
So like I'm not terribly I'm not going to be very worried about like how you're going to develop Drake May, because obviously that should be his strength. What I want to know is what is going to be your approach with building a coaching staff? Who do you want to be the DC? Who's going to be your OC? Do you have veteran coaches coming in around you? Obviously, we just talked about that's one of the issues that we dealt with Mayo.
Right.
They didn't have enough leadership and veteran leadership around them. So, how are you going to build your staff? What's your plans there? And then, what's your overall approach towards leading a team? How are you as a coach? How do you handle tough situations in the locker room? How do you handle personalities? How are you going to deal with this situation where you're going to be the first time dealing with all these extra things that you've never had to deal with before? How are you going to deal with that? And I think there's a chance that he comes in and he blows you out of the water. I like that. There certainly is a chance of that. But I think, and this is just my gut feeling, I kind of think Robert Kraft obviously wants Vrabel, but I think Jonathan Kraft might be more inclined to Ben Johnson. That's just my gut feeling. But Ben Johnson's going to have to go in there tomorrow, and if he wants the job, he's going to have to blow them away, and it's entirely possible that he does.
Right.
And then obviously, we, like I said, we don't know the details of how the Crafts are feeling, and Elliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith, those who are seemingly in the interview process, and what's her face, the
Glazer,
Robin Glazer. Yeah. So, we don't know obviously what they're all thinking, but he's going to have to blow them away. And, if he does, I don't know if we kind of say, does Kraft have the balls to do things? Well, we didn't think he had the balls to fire Mayo. So, I'm not going to rule out the fact that if he honestly thinks that Ben Johnson is the best candidate, I think he'll do that. And, so, and we could say he's going to be biased in his own view. He's going to naturally convince himself that it's Vrabel. But, he has shown the decision-making just in the firing of Mayo that says he's willing to do what he feels is best and needs to be done because that's the tough decision. And the truth of the matter is Vrabel could not get this job and he's going to land on his feet with another job. So it's not like you're pushing him out into the street with nothing else.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of peace of mind in that where it's like you kind of have a little bit of confidence that Kraft is willing to do what is necessary to get to where they want to go. If he had the conviction to fire Mayo an hour, 90 minutes after the game was over, you kind of hope that, okay, well, he didn't wait around. Obviously he saw the product, he heard the noise, he decided this was the right decision. At least you can say he has the conviction to make the hard decision and, in this case, make the right decision. In hindsight, it was probably the right decision to fire Jerod Mayo. Now, who knows, we may be, a year from now, we may say, I don't think we'll say that Jerod Mayo should have been the guy and we shouldn't have fired him. But, I think that you can feel confident that Kraft is ready to make the hard decision because he knows that he's not going to be, even whether he's around physically or emotionally, he's not going to be the owner of this team more than 5 years from now. Within the next 5 years, it's either going to be a new owner or he's stepping down and Jonathan's taking his place.
Yeah, I was going to say it's either going to be he's off this, he's in the ground or whatever like that, and Kraft's taken over. Jonathan Kraft's taken over, or he stepped down because he's just kind of too old to.
And he has to know that he can't screw up a second head coach, so he's going to do all the vetting that needs to be done, whether that's Vrabel, Johnson, or somebody else.
Basically, what we just said is, in this, and I haven't even really thought about it this way, is, we're now 2 decisions in the last 12 months where he has had to fire the coach that won him 6 Super Bowls, that had been there for 24 years. 4 or so years.
Yep.
And then a year later, you have to fire someone that you've been close with for over a decade now, for 15 years, that you handpicked supposedly years prior, that you love like a son, that calls him Thunder or Big
whatever the
Cat.
hell,
Well, I don't know, what a Cat Thunder or whatever it was. And those were probably extremely difficult decisions, but he had seemingly made the tough choice both times and in the right direction.
He has egg on his face for the way this season turned out, which is kind of what I'm getting at, is egg on his face for the way the season turned out, especially the fact that he comes out and he says, hey, I had him handpicked after the Jerusalem trip 5 years ago, whatever it is. And it's like, well, the guy wasn't ready, dude. And I know it wasn't his fault because obviously Bill was forced out before. But now, like I said, he's got to absolutely nail this, vet everybody he's going to get.
Yeah.
So,
well, props to Kraft. Like when he came out and spoke to the media, like he owned it. The first words he said, "This is all my fault." Like he owned it. He basically was like, "This is on me. I feel absolute horrible. Like we didn't set up Jerod to succeed. Like, I love him like a son, all that." And he feels like he failed Jerod, but like ultimately he felt like this was a move that had to be made. And so he made the decision. So, I do think it will be Mike Vrabel, but I do think that they're going to hear Ben Johnson out and like actually seriously consider him.
Yeah.
The question is, he can only interview via Zoom tomorrow. If they love him, are they willing to wait?
That's the question, because they'd have to wait. They'd have to wait until the line, if and when the Lions get eliminated.
Yeah, which is at least a whole nother week. So the question is, okay, well, does Vrabel take another job? And then what if Vrabel takes another job and then Ben Johnson chooses another team? Well, then what do what do you do then? They could end up with the only two people that are options that they interviewed are Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. So that's a path they need to be careful with. They need to kind of, in theory, they might have to make the decision off this Zoom meeting. And not that that's really ideal.
Yeah.
But they might have to make the decision off the Zoom meeting because I don't think Vrabel is going to sit around on his hands waiting for the Pats to make a decision. He might give them a little time, but they're going to have to make a decision because if you sit around on your hands hoping, trying to play it out and waiting for Ben Johnson to be done in Detroit and saying, then I'll make a decision. Well, Vrabel's not going to sit on his hands. He's going to take a job.
No, it's a losing battle for Ben Johnson because he has to absolutely blow him out of the water, and I just can't see that happening. So, like you said, gut says Vrabel. Am I leaning towards Johnson? Probably, but I can't see it happening. Like, it's
very, very stupid that why can't the Crafts fly to Detroit tonight and go interview in person? That's stupid.
I don't know.
Why does it have to be over Zoom? I get him not having to go to New England, but why can't the Crafts take an overnight flight to Detroit or just a fucking 7 a.m. flight to Detroit and have a meeting with him in the morning? I don't really get, but
that's true.
Overall, they're in a tough spot.
The league must feel like face-to-face access to a coach is somehow that's in the playoffs is somehow a disadvantage to the coach.
Yeah, but aren't they didn't they do this for years ago, years and years, and it's a recent change?
So the recent change was, and it may have been multiple changes, but I know last year it was any coach in the playoffs was eligible to interview remotely the first week, but then regardless of whether you were eliminated.
No, only bye week teams. The only people that can interview remotely are Glenn.
Right. No, I'm talking about last year. The change was you could only interview in person after the bye week if the team was eliminated. It used to be that you could interview coaches even if the team wasn't eliminated, but you couldn't do it in person until after the second weekend. But then it did used to be if you go back, I think 5 or 10 years. Well, it had to be at least 5 because there were no interviews during COVID in person anyway. But you'd have to go back 5, 6, whatever it is, 10 years for coaches to be able to do in-person interviews during the playoffs before the first game.
Yeah, they have a tough decision to make, and I ultimately think it's going to be Vrabel. But
yeah, I would expect Vrabel to be announced as the head coach Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, but people need to think of that situation, and I'm going to go post about it after that. They need to decide. It's very likely they need to decide if they're hiring Mayo, if they're hiring Ben Johnson or Vrabel off of the first interview with Ben Johnson.
Yeah,
because you can't in theory, it's possible Detroit gets eliminated first round, but you can't bank on that. What if they go to the Super Bowl?
Right.
And then all of a sudden you can't. That means you would have to drag this out another 6 weeks, 5 weeks.
You're talking about if the Lions keep winning.
Yeah, and make it to the Super Bowl. Like we're looking at, I think 5 weeks. We got the wild card round, divisional round, AFC Championship, and then 2 weeks.
So Super Bowl 59 is 1 month from today.
Yeah, so another 4 weeks. Now, in theory, like I said, they could make the decision and come to an agreement over Zoom. But like that's, I don't know. It seems kind of weird to hire someone that you've never met in person.
Yeah. Right. Quick Patriots thing, Matt. You had tweeted that you wanted that as Patriots fans, you should want Drew Alar or whatever you say his last name to ball out tonight.
Yeah.
Can you just
how's he doing?
Can you 4 of 11 for 49 yards, and the second quarter just started.
Not that great. What's your question?
So for myself and anybody who follows, I'm curious why. Like dive into that a little bit as to why you want.
It's pretty
all out.
It's pretty simple. So he's seen pretty highly around the NFL circles, it seems, with the guy with a lot of potential. And there was a lot of talk that he was going to stay, but then there's a lot of talk that if he comes out and balls out against Notre Dame, goes to the championship, balls out against Texas or Ohio State, that he's going to be a top 5 pick if he enters the draft. And if he's a top 5 pick, that adds another guy that the Patriots don't need to take into that mix, that all of a sudden, the Giants will be considering him, the Jets will be considering the Raiders will consider him, and all of a sudden that number 4 pick, there's another guy in the mix, and it becomes a little bit more valuable. That would mean that there's 3 quarterbacks that are in the mix, and then Travis Hunter instead of 2 and Travis Hunter. And I just think overall it could jump that number 4 pick value up into the next tier of value across the league. So that's really what it is. I'm a big Drew Alar guy.
Okay. The reason I was curious is, so Pro Football Focus, obviously more clout. But there's another website I've been following, NFL Draft Buzz. They do prospect rankings for the upcoming draft class. Neither one of those websites has him listed as a prospect. So I'll be really curious.
He currently said that he's staying. That's what he said last couple weeks ago.
Carson Beck just entered the transfer portal. He's still Pro Football Focus is like 6th ranked quarterback prospect.
Well, it's because he had originally said that he was going to go into the draft.
Yeah.
So
but so where I was going with that is I'll be curious to see like if he does declare where he goes, because right now the consensus is that Cam Ward is the number 1 quarterback of the class, and then it's some order of Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, and Dylan Gabriel are like the next 3 guys.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to see where he's 3 to start. Okay. All right. I think come draft time,
that'll obviously affect, like you said, what the Pats do it for.
Yeah, come draft time, he would be in the conversation with Ward and Sanders that says like, I'm considering Alar just as much as those 2 guys. Alar's young; he's not even 21 yet. So he's super freaking young. So he can stay in college if he wants, and it may not really hurt him, and it could help. But I would love to see him drafted by a team where he can sit for a year, develop, and then take off, and he'll still only be 22 years old. He's still obviously he's just crazy young right now, so he has plenty of room to develop. He's already pretty impressive, and I like his game right now. That's kind of what it comes down to. But
cool.
All right.
Sorry, I was just curious because I figured, I was like, oh, the game started an hour ago. Let me tune in, and it was 0-0 until Penn State kicked a field goal. But
yeah. All right. Yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for this week. We'll be back hopefully next week. We'll probably know who the Patriots head coach is. I would say I think there's a good chance of that. I think that the Sox might make a move by then. We've been saying that for weeks now. I don't know. Maybe Bregman signs. Maybe he signs elsewhere. I don't know. But until next week, we'll raise the banner. Thanks for listening, and peace out.
Have a good night, guys.
Later, guys.
Later.